morning, everyone, and welcome to the Pittsburgh Current podcast. I am Pittsburgh Current editor and publisher Charlie Deitch, and thank you for joining us today here live from Sorgatron Media in the heart of the beautiful Beachview Business District. The new issue of the Pittsburgh Current is on the streets this week. It's our football issue. We've got 10 burning questions on the Pittsburgh Steelers. We have Jody DePerna takes a look at what the Pitt Panthers are expected to do this year. And we also have a couple of changes, programming notes that I think you'll want to check out. First, I want to say that I'm very sad that our political columnist, Ariana Behringer, first of all, we want to say we're very happy for her. She is the executive director of Veterans Affairs. She recently was named that at the University of Pittsburgh. So it's a great opportunity for her. Unfortunately for us and for our readers, that means that she will no longer be able to write political columns for the Pittsburgh Current. But this week we do debut new political columnist Kieran Young. Many of you will know Kieran as the candidate for District 9 City Council last year. He's been around. He's been a district committeeman for years. He's been around political scenes for a long time. So check out Kieran's new column. And we also debut this week a new fact check column that we're going to be having each print issue by David D'Angelo, co-founder of the blog Two Political Junkies. So we're very excited about bringing those folks on board. And then also I want to remind you that we have 6 days left for our Kickstarter for Rob Rogers to bring back Brood on Grant and also to keep local cartoons, our local cartoons in the Pittsburgh Current. There's 6 days left, and we're starting to gain some momentum. I guess these things always sometimes kick in the last week.
Hi guys,
so
Bethany here, associate publisher
help
for
support
Pittsburgh
local
Current.
cartoonists and
I
support,
don't think I really need to
Rob
tell you
Rogers
guys the
and
devastating
keep
impact that conservative
cartooning,
ownership has had on
alive
the
and
media
well
landscape, both
in
nationally
media,
and
we
locally.
would appreciate any help you could give. Today we're going to be talking about a very serious topic, and also one that everyone is talking about, which is immigration issues. In particular, we're going to be talking with us today is Laura Perkins, the emergency response coordinator with Casa San Jose, and we're going to be talking about how these things are affecting residents in Pittsburgh. Laura, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Let's start off for some of our listeners who might not be completely in tune with what your organization does. Tell us a little bit about Casa San Jose and what your mission is.
Sure. Casa San Jose was founded in 2013 by Sister Janice Vanderneck, who is a sister of St. Joseph. Mm-hmm. She'd been working with the Latino and Latina community for about 10 years beforehand, and she just saw a need for support services, specifically with the undocumented community here in Pittsburgh. So ever since she started working them, we've grown. We're still here in Beachview. Yeah. We're proud residents, or at least our offices. And yeah, we provide social services. We have caseworkers. We have youth programs. We have a community organizer. And then we also have just really connect residents with resources so that they can live their lives independently without fear.
And what is the how has the Latino community in Pittsburgh, how has that sort of grown over the years? And we do see a lot of that population is living here in Beachview, in the South Hills. And what is that? What percentage of that population is undocumented and thus facing a lot of these issues?
Yeah, so Pittsburgh has had a Latino community for a while, since it's been Pittsburgh, probably. But yeah, recently we've been seeing more arrivals. We have, compared to other cities, we have a pretty small and pretty new Latino population. Mm-hmm. But as they develop roots here and connections and community, we see second, third, fourth generations as well, but there's still new arrivals. So there's a rich mix here in Pittsburgh.
So there are lots of topics surrounding the immigration issue, but the one that happens to be, of course, taking up a lot of attention and probably rightfully so is the issue with the raids by ICE, the Immigration and Customs Enforcement arm of the government. Are we seeing? I used to cover in a former life. I covered immigration issues under when it was the INS and the indefinite detention. So back in the late '90s, early 2000s. So I covered that very heavily. And so how have we changed from because the INS never had a great reputation, and now here we go. We have ICE. How has our immigration enforcement arm sort of changed over the last decade or so?
Yeah, there's a lot to talk about,
Yeah.
right? So there were a lot of reforms in 1996, along with President at the time Clinton's criminal justice policies, where they detained a lot of Black and brown people on pretty minimal charges, especially related to drugs. So along with that came more strict immigration policies. And then, of course, the creation of the Department of Homeland Security after 9/11 completely restructured how the United States deals with immigration, kind of more logistically and just through the government. I do want to say, kind of going way back, is that the U.S.'s immigration policy is founded on white supremacy. So the first border patrol, I'm using air quotes, was white supremacists along the U.S.-Mexico border, and it's really telling that it was really only on the U.S.-Mexico border because there are brown people down there, and there aren't brown people on the U.S. or like coming in through the border with Canada. And so I just wanted to say that it was founded on white supremacy, and that hasn't really left the policy. You see that immigrants of color, are being arrested at much higher rates, and that continues to grow with every year, this disparity. Europeans are not really targeted, and the biggest people who are here, quote unquote, illegally, are actually people that are overstaying visas, which aren't typically people from Central America. So the 1996, there was a big change, and then of course the Department of Homeland Security kind of brought various efforts together under one umbrella organization. And then, of course, more recently, under the Obama administration, the rates of detentions went way up under the Obama administration, which a lot of people don't know.
Right.
And then now, with the Trump administration, I mean, everyone knows the sweeping changes. It's hard for me to keep track, and that's my job. Like, every day, it's a new change. So, I mean, everything from keeping kids in changes to changing what type of person can get a visa or a green card, which is now only wealthier people. So it's not only discrimination of people based on skin color, it's also based on their economic abilities to provide for themselves, which is a little silly considering how pretty much everyone here that isn't a Native American or a slave, a lot of the families came over very poor. Right. I know that my ancestors did, and I think a lot of people's did, but now we see that being targeted as well economically. A lot of changes under the Trump administration, which would take a long time to get into, but that was a long answer.
Sure. No, that's good. And one thing that I think that there seemed to be, you talked about what happened under the Clinton administration that turned into basically if the INS would label you a danger to society. Now that if you had a DUI, they could label you a danger to society, and they would lock you up. They would deport you if they could, but if they couldn't deport you, like if you were Cuban or I did a story when I first came to the city in 2000 about a Laotian immigrant who helped the United States in the war in Laos, and so he was given asylum. But if he was sent back to Laos, he would have been, he's a political prisoner. So we've got these folks who couldn't be sent anywhere, and so that I think was the start of the small county prisons and becoming these detention centers because they were making 3 times as much by taking an INS, a federal inmate, than they were having local inmates. And so a lot of places like the York County Prison in York, PA, they specifically built out to become an immigration holding facility. And there was an immigration court right there in the jail. And so now here we are. And that seemed to be federal judges and immigration judges at some point started, I think, pushing back against that. And now there were people that were in fact, the Laotian immigrant that I wrote about was released after it was brought to light that he really wasn't a danger to anyone. And but then again, the post 9/11 world, and then again, as we get into the Trump world, it just seems like we're taking steps backwards, and I'm sure that's something that you're seeing.
Yes. Yeah, a couple of things that you mentioned. One is about the money, the flow of money. This is all about the flow of money.
Yeah.
The detention of immigrants is driven in large part by private prison corporations that make a lot of money off this. It is very difficult to communicate with someone once they've been detained because of you can't even make a phone call without draining whatever money you did have.
Right.
And just the food that goes in that's another private corporation. And so, and the prisons themselves. So there's a lot of money going around. Another thing that I wanted to hit on, oh no, I lost it. Oh, sorry.
It's okay. But that's that there's always somebody getting paid at the end of these things, and that's why they can say it's about safety, they can say it's about security or whatever they want to say, but at the end of the day, somebody's always making money at the end of this thing, and I please correct me if I'm misspeaking, but there have been, despite the fact that the Latino population in Pittsburgh is smaller than other major cities, we have seen an increase. I'm not incorrect in that, right? We have seen an increase in ICE agents here and cracking down on undocumented immigrants. Would that be fair to say?
I personally don't know because I've been doing this less than a year, just about a year now.
Sure.
But it's a lot. It's disproportionate given how small the population is. When I go down to ICE to accompany clients to their check-ins or hearings, or even when I go down when someone's been detained, the people that were detained that I get to speak to usually say that there's like 7-8 other people detained alongside them that are being processed.
Right.
And ICE works Monday through Friday. And so when you do that math, that's about like 35 per week.
Yeah.
And when you think how small the population is here in Pittsburgh, it's alarming.
Yeah.
And when you think that every time they detain one person, I picture the kids, coming home from school and asking their mother where their father is. And then the mother having to make really uncomfortable phone calls saying that she can't pay the bills. And they have to move out of their house because the father's in detention. And the father has no prior criminal record.
Right.
He was just getting a ride from someone that was detained, and he was picked up alongside them. And because he didn't have any phone numbers memorized, he wasn't able to contact the wife to let her know. And so sometimes it takes days and weeks before she musters up the courage to call, make a lot of uncomfortable phone calls. And so every time one person's detained, you have to think about the family and everything behind that that is just being destroyed.
Yeah, it's really, I mean, and especially if you had a spouse or someone who was you realize either by you get a call or you just realize the fact that they don't come home for a day or so, you realize that something happened. You're in the same situation, so you don't know whether are you going to be safe, because then you have your children to take into account. Can you call somebody and risk the chance that the same thing's going to happen to you? And
so that's where my job comes in as the emergency response organizer. I hand out my business card like candy to pretty anyone and everyone that will take it because the emergency response number, I always answer and I never judge. It's just we're here to support them. And we have a team of volunteer attorneys that are wonderful, that drop what they're doing and they go down to ICE with me, and we get all the information we can, so that we can connect them with legal services and often housing and food, and emotional support through this tough time.
And you can find more information about Casa San Jose at casasanjose.org. Do you have some social media channels, or would you like to give that number?
Yeah, I'd be happy to give the number is 412-736-7167. And that number is both for Latino community members, but also for allies. If they think that they see an ICE detention or they know of someone that is in need in the Latino community, you can always call or text that number. And it's much better to contact us because we have experience in dealing with that than posting on social media. Because so the goal of this administration, I mean, they've even said it, is to create fear so that new immigrants don't come over, and we know that isn't working.
Right.
What it is doing is creating anxiety within the community and not letting them live their lives to the fullest and not letting them pursue their happiness like they should be able to. And so by sharing on social media, especially if there aren't many details involved, it's spreading that fear, which really does affect the community. It's hard for us white people to imagine what that's like, right? When a police officer stops me, I don't have the fear that a person of color does. And so there's no way that I can ever imagine what that's like. And so when someone's seeing the same thing, ICE is in Pittsburgh posted on social media, it's a gripping fear.
Yeah. Let's talk about that. And I don't want to give it any more credence than it already got. Yeah. But there was an incident in the last couple of weeks in which somebody posted on social media that they believed an undercover ICE agent was approaching people in a local grocery store to see if they were undocumented. So take me through something like that. Number one, how do you know? There are several things here. How do you know that somebody? I mean, is there a way to spot ICE agents? And that instance, for example, was that legitimate? And the fact is, it just shouldn't have been put out to cause a panic, or was that maybe, or do people sometimes think that they're seeing something and they're putting it out there and then obviously causing a fear and a panic? So how does that? How do these things start? And is there a way for people to identify ICE agents?
Sure. ICE agents in Pittsburgh, the ones that do the actual detention, because some ICE agents, are in the office, but all ICE agents in Pittsburgh are male. They look like an officer physically. They're muscly, short, kind of crew cut, like short hair, and they have two outfits that they wear. One is khaki pants with an athletic or polo shirt. And they usually have a gun on their hip, so that's one. And then the other, and kind of work/athletic shoes, if that makes sense, like movable work shoes. And then the other is they wear a black vest that looks like kind of a bulletproof vest, and on the back it says police in all capital letters, and then below it says ICE, which I do want to kind of enter into the tactic of even putting those words on the back of a vest. Police is a word that you can understand through many languages, right? It's one of the first words that you learn, and it's a cognate in Spanish. ICE officers don't operate like police officers. Right. And so I think that's very intentional. Yeah. It's meant to confuse. ICE is an acronym. ICE in Spanish, or ICE is cold water. Right. They don't write immigration, right? Which is easy to understand. So I think it's very intentional how they identify themselves, kind of, again, to create this fear and confusion. So their vehicles, the ones that they use to detain are large SUVs, either black or metallic colors. The Department of Homeland Security does have vehicles that are around Pittsburgh. I know there's a FEMA which is under the Department of Homeland Security. I know there's one in Pittsburgh. It's often downtown.
Yep.
And it's usually a white vehicle. It can be many different kinds of vehicles with a wide green diagonal slash.
Yeah.
But it's not really important to know these because those vehicles don't detain people, is my understanding.
Okay.
I have never seen that. So those are more like investigations, and they do other things. But that's how you can identify them. Now, when we talk about Trump's tweet about how he was going to do raids and detain millions of immigrants.
Mm-hmm.
So we didn't really see that in Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
One thing is that the Department of Homeland Security, I think it was in an interview with the New York Times or with some media, they identified 10 cities that was going to happen in, and it didn't happen.
Right.
And even in those cities,
yeah.
Brooklyn, New York did a great job of communities defending themselves
Yes.
and not opening the door when ICE agents came to their door. In Pittsburgh, the detentions don't typically happen at the door because people know their rights now.
Right.
And they know to ask for a warrant signed by a judge with the correct information on it. What we're seeing is what they do is they watch the house for a day, figure out when the person leaves in the morning, and then they wait for them to leave and get about a block away from their house, either walking or in their car, and that's when they detain them, which is very intentional because often if you're waving goodbye to your dad when he leaves for work, they wouldn't see that.
Yeah.
Unfortunately. And so it creates less trouble for them.
Yeah.
ICE compared to police's goal is to ensure that the area is safe before they leave. That is not ICE's goal. And so they don't stick around. It's usually a 15-minute ordeal, and they're in and out.
Yeah.
And that's why it's hard to see these happening.
Right.
It's my job, and I respond immediately, and I have yet to arrive at the site of a detention that's still going on. Right. So to my knowledge, no one witnessed in this recent time period any detentions because it's difficult, and I didn't see anything out of the ordinary.
Right. This is the Pittsburgh Current podcast, and we are talking with Laura Perkins of Casa San Jose. We're talking about immigration. We're talking about the rights of immigrants and undocumented immigrants. That's what we're going to be talking about here in just a second. But first, I want to talk about our sponsor, Chip Drop. Chip Drop helps gardeners get free mulch from local neighborhood companies. Using local natural mulch in your garden is the best way to stop weeds and help your plants while saving money. You can sign up at chipdrop.com, and that is they'll bring it to your house, for you, absolutely free. It's a good program. Check it out, chipdrop.com. So, Laura, you talked a little bit. You mentioned a couple things that I want to kind of zero in on. And one was warrants and things like that. But what is a person's right when they are approached by ICE, or what is ICE's procedures in terms of, do they need to have a specific warrant, or can they just, because in the city of Pittsburgh and in Allegheny County there are I don't know if you wouldn't call it a non-cooperation agreement, but there are policies put in place that police are not to cooperate or notify ICE agents, and they're not supposed to ask someone their citizenship, and which I'm not sure. I don't know how much that is still going on, but and then also that Allegheny County Jail also has a policy of not accepting ICE prisoners. So, talk to me a little bit. Take me through some of that in terms of what rights do folks have, and what is the policy and procedure to detain someone.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned about kind of the different police forces. We do know your rights with community members and allies, and that's something we always touch on, because it really depends on where you are if a police stops you on what happens with your immigration situation. Pittsburgh police, all 6 zones, do not share information with ICE. and we haven't experienced that to be untrue, if that makes sense. We haven't noticed that being untrue. But the surrounding areas, as you said, Allegheny County is very big, and there are many police departments and townships. Not all are like that. Some are, but I'm in the process of going through each of them and documenting all of them and the information we don't have, trying to get more so that we can pressure them. But I can tell you, like, Castle Shannon is horrible. Yeah. And it's documented how bad it is. It's in their policy. And it's one thing to have racist police officers that, pull people over for minor infractions because of the color of their skin. But it's another thing to have it in your policy to say, if they don't speak English, that's a hint that they might not be documented. Right. So that's definitely something. You did mention Allegheny County Jail. Because of a settlement after a lawsuit with the ACLU, they can receive detainers, ICE detainers, but they cannot contact ICE until the second the person is being released. That's hard to measure.
But they can.
Well, they can contact them when they're being released. Okay. But the release process takes a while. The processing process takes a while, and so that's kind of a shady area. Yeah. Right. Yeah. And that we're trying to look into that and trying to make sure that it is enforced as the settlement wrote it.
So that is a policy born out of a lawsuit, whereas the police policy, I think, was the city police policy was something more born out of leaders saying we're not going to cooperate. That's I actually didn't know that. I was confused about that because it was presented to me when I asked for policies for our recent story that we recently did. I was just given the policy, and I read the policy. I'm like, it says they won't cooperate. Yeah, it was not in there that they could be called immediately upon release or whatever. Yeah, that poor must get cut off my email. What about Allegheny County Police? Now I know that some municipalities obviously have their own police departments. What about Allegheny County Police? Do they have a policy?
I personally haven't read through all of it. So there was a bunch of right to know requests. Which is the more local version of the Freedom of Information Act request, submitted by law students at the Temple's Scheller Law School, or Scheller School of Justice, and they released 500 something pages on Allegheny County Jail that I haven't sifted through yet, unfortunately.
Yeah, I'm sure it's a lot. Like it's. I know you guys, you have, there, we say that there's an organization here that is helping and that is looking out for folks, but you're just one agency. You're just however many you have on staff. It's tough for everyone, or for one organization to keep track of everything going on. So I guess then it falls on the community to sort of.
Well, and one thing that really helps is we have lovely volunteers. And there's a gentleman that's helping me out just out of his own time with this project because there are so many areas like Mount Lebanon, Fox Chapel. There's so many areas around Pittsburgh that aren't within Pittsburgh Police, and so Casa San Jose is so lucky to have a lot of volunteers. And if anyone wants to help us with this project, feel free to contact me. It's a lot of work, but it's very rewarding, right? And we can then use that information to lobby these local townships and boroughs to really have a more human rights approach to how they work. And in my mind, human rights and ICE don't correspond. It's a Venn diagram that's not one circle. Let's just say that.
I'm with you. And so, I want to make sure that we don't miss this. I want to make sure we specifically ask this. So what is someone's rights if they're approached, and what is the now, we can't always say that the procedures are followed by ICE agents, but what are the procedures? I mean, can they just stop and ask someone's citizenship? Do they need a warrant of some kind? Walk me through that process, and what rights do people have?
Yeah. So the three most important things that we tell them in any situation is if you remain calm, and avoid this situation escalating, that always helps. And that's really true in most situations. The other is they do have a right to remain silent. And they do have a right to speak with their attorney. Unfortunately, in immigration court, you don't have a right to a free attorney,
right?
But at least you have a right to speak with your attorney or an attorney. So those are three things that apply across the board. Now, in other it depends on the situation. If you're within a closed building or vehicle, that's when a warrant is needed, which is true with police officers as well. For them to get in to that building or vehicle, you need a warrant, and that warrant needs to be signed by a judge. Immigration's a little different in this sense with other criminal justice, where the judicial side, the judges are under the Department of Justice, but the Department of Homeland Security is different. So an administrative warrant is signed by an agent, but a judicial warrant has the signature of a judge. And that warrant has to have the person's name spelled correctly. If it's not spelled correctly, it's not a valid warrant. And then if it's a house or a business or any type of building, it needs to have that address on it, and that address has to be correct. So a warrant is needed for, again, like a private part of a business or a house or even a vehicle. They need a warrant to search a vehicle. And if not, that's trespassing. If the person says that they do not give permission for them to enter, and they do forcefully, that's trespassing. Now, if a door is slightly open, like if someone opens the door a crack to speak with them, that is considered an invitation to enter.
Really?
Yeah. And so there are a lot of videos that you can see, you can look up where that happens. You open the door a crack to say, who is it? Or, you don't have a window in your door so you want to see, but they just push the door open, they just go in. So what we tell people is to ask them to show their identification in the window or under the door, and that's for the warrant as well. When you ask who it is, they will usually say a federal agent. That's how they identify themselves, which is confusing.
Right.
So you can say, what kind of federal agent? What agency do you work with? But again, this is all made pretty difficult when you don't speak English.
Yes, of course, yeah.
So you can ask them to identify themselves, and they have to identify themselves as federal agents, as I said. And one thing that we tell them is if there is a warrant, if it is valid, that person does have to present themselves if they are there.
Right.
And the other people in the house do not have to. And we know that under the Trump administration, ICE agents do collateral arrests, which is they don't just grab the person they're looking for, they grab everyone in the vicinity that they think might be undocumented. And so if a person in a house or in a car fits that warrant and the warrant is valid, then they should say, I am coming out and I don't give permission for you to enter into this vehicle or building, and I don't give you permission to go through my things. And so they can go out, and the other people that are in the house should be behind a locked door somewhere else, so that they can leave, and the rest of the family or people in the house are still safe.
Wow.
And before they do, they should make some phone calls, quick phone calls. If they have an immigration attorney, they should call them. And if not, they can call the emergency response number, and we'll jump into action.
You can give that number again, Laura,
412-736-7167.
And what about someone who is having lunch across the street? The people who are out in the open, is there some sort of probable cause that has to exist for, and listen, I may be totally, maybe there aren't, sort of open air, just sort of arrests or trolling or something like that, to see, who might be an undocumented immigrant. Do we see that, or are there fishing expeditions, I guess, for lack of a better word, and what governs those in terms of who they can detain or who they can take?
Oh, I see. We've seen ICE vehicles in Beachview.
Yeah.
Because that's where a large portion of the Latino population is. And we'll have community members take pictures of it and send it to me, and I'll go there to see if I can find them. And as an ally, and especially because I'm privileged due to being someone that looks under their minds innocent, right?
Right, sure.
I approach them and I ask them what they're doing. I'd like to see identification and why they're in the neighborhood, and imply that they're not welcome here. But again, whenever we do advocacy work, our main priority is the security of those that are most vulnerable. And so, for example, if I, take a picture or record what they're doing, and if there's any undocumented person or even someone that doesn't feel comfortable around law enforcement near me, and I draw attention to them, I might be doing more harm than good. And then again, if I post it on social media and create this fear, that's another thing. So we have to be intelligent about how we document and then what we do with that information.
And kind of going to what allies can do or what other folks can do. We've seen some things recently, and I don't know where this happened, a story that I read recently. I showed up at a person's home, and the neighbors sort of surrounded the vehicle, and they blocked the home and so forth. So talking about something like that. So is that something that folks can do legally? Now, if they were to do that, if the police were there to serve a warrant or something like that, and folks were to do that, I'm guessing there'd be a lot of handcuffs and so forth pulled out. That didn't happen in this case. What is ICE's jurisdiction in something like that?
Whether they can arrest an ally?
Yeah, or whether they can sort of push why didn't they push their way through to execute that warrant or do blockades or some things like that, interference? Do they help, and is that a safe thing to do?
So every situation is different, and I think, as we mentioned before, it really depends on where it is, and how the local police cooperate with ICE. So if you're in a more rural area, typically we see that more urban area, the rural-urban, there's so many differences.
Right, sure.
And one of them is that we typically see that police cooperate with ICE more in rural areas.
Sure.
And so, but anyway, so you have to take that into account, right? Are the police on their side? And it's really your decision as an ally if you want to risk that. But I would again reiterate that you could get arrested for preventing an arrest. And I think that it should be very calculated. And I don't think that anyone should ever do that without consulting the most vulnerable person in that situation.
Yes.
So I don't think that as privileged people, we should decide what they need.
Right.
And so I think that the situation that you're referring to, I think that situation started with someone saying hi to their neighbor.
Yeah.
And just kind of starting a conversation, maybe breaking bread together,
Right.
and helping to mow each other's lawn and creating a relationship with them such that when this happened, the allies were legitimately worried for the people that they cared about. And so even it's easy to say, oh no, I care for my immigrant neighbors, but if you don't know them, how do you know their vulnerabilities? How do you know someone needs to pick up their kid from school? So I think that that's more important than jumping into action and putting yourself and maybe other people at risk.
Yeah.
When I think that the relationships and the asking how their family is, I think that goes a longer way personally.
This is the Pittsburgh Current Podcast, and we are wrapping up today with Laura Perkins of Casa San Jose. I don't think we should wrap up because we have probably 1,000 other things that we could talk about. But just sort of in the last few minutes, Laura, I'm going to kind of throw it to you. What to kind of talk about some things that people might want to know, or some things that you guys are doing at Casa San Jose that you want to get out there.
Yeah, I just wanted to touch on some rhetoric.
Please.
So the term raid versus detention.
Yeah.
So raids typically happen with larger groups and of people that they're trying to detain, and also they bring a lot of agents to make that happen. The raid in Kentucky recently, and the chicken processing plants, that was a large raid. But a raid can be in an apartment building or a workplace usually. We don't typically see raids in Pittsburgh as much. What we see in Pittsburgh are detentions, and that's when usually about 4 ICE agents detain between 1 and 4 or 5 people. So that's one thing. And then you've been using this term, great, but it's always good to reiterate the term illegal to refer to a person. So no one can be illegal. Their status can be illegal, but what they are is undocumented. Right. They don't have the documents to have a legal status here. So just wanted to kind of touch on those two things.
Yeah.
But yeah.
It's so just finally, what do you where do you see when do we get change, I guess? When do we see sort of an end to this? Does it take next year's election probably, or what do you see kind of in the future as we're going right now? How do you see this continuing in the future?
This is a very, very long-term fight. Like I said, immigration policy was established on white supremacy a long, long time ago when the borders were created, and even before the borders were created. So I don't see this as this being solved short-term, but there are many short-term things that we can do. And like I said, it starts with saying hi to your neighbor. Yeah. But there are also a lot of policies that we're working on. We have a campaign to get driver's licenses for all, so that if someone is pulled over or if someone is involved in an accident, they don't have to leave as the victim because they're scared about being detained by ICE. Because this targets victims as well, which is just horrible. And so we're part of a driver's licenses for all campaign. We're trying to help our youth get access to loans and grants for going to university. We're working on police policy, and we're trying to get Governor Wolf to shut down a family detention center that is in Pennsylvania. So there are absolutely short-term and middle-term things that we can focus on, in addition to the horrible things that are happening due to the fluctuations in U.S. National politics.
Laura Perkins, thank you so much for being with us today. And you can check out casasanjose.org for more information. And this has been the Pittsburgh Current Podcast. And check out pittsburghcurrent.com. We will have updated and new news most days. And please check out our Kickstarter, Bring Back Brood on Grant on Kickstarter.com. And have a great week. A better alternative, giving Pittsburgh a better alternative, giving Pittsburgh a better alternative.